Okay, hello, new interns. Today we have an awesome guest. I'm going to be interviewing Adaeze, and she recently finished an internship. I won't tell you for who yet because she'll explain herself, but she was a sales and marketing intern. And so we're going to explore kind of what that means, what that meant for her, how she got her position, what she did in her role, and then maybe some advice she has for us. So first things first, I want to ask, how are you?
I'm doing good. You know how it is being in school.
Oh
Gets
yeah,
really busy.
especially when you're studying at. Well, I don't want to give that away. That's the first question. So I'm going to ask you, um, where do you currently attend university, and what's your major, and what's your expected grad date?
So I'm currently a senior at UC Berkeley, but I'm in a program right now called UCDC, where it allows me to do a fellowship in DC first semester, as well do another internship. So my expected graduation is spring 2023, and I'm double majoring in political science and media studies.
Whoa, okay. That must be a ton of work, double majoring at UC Berkeley. Seriously, I respect that a lot. Okay, moving into kind of some basic info about, well, first, before we go into that, what was your title during this internship, and what was the company you were working for? And maybe if you have a little background on them, just who they were, nothing too long.
So my official title for the company I was working with was a ramp sales and marketing intern, and I was working for Western Digital. So whenever people like ask me what company that is, if you know SanDisk, that company, they own SanDisk, and they're basically data and hard drive storage. They own like 50% of the world's data storage. So it's a pretty big
Oh,
company.
okay, cool. Yeah, I was wondering kind of who they were. Got it. And to get this role, did you apply on a job site, or did you have a referral from a friend, or did they reach out to you?
So with this position, I was pretty well, I wouldn't say I was like extremely lucky. I think that I had a external recruiter reach out to me through a company called Jobwell. They basically help students of color get internships in like business, tech, media, all of those different avenues. So I had to basically, I got reached out to on LinkedIn by a recruiter from that company. And I went through their process of like interviews and kind of just making sure that I would be the right role for that company. And then after I got through that round of interviews, I went through like my official interviews with Western Digital.
Wow, okay. And so I know you just mentioned it all, but I kind of want to just make sure I have the timeline here. From the moment that you started responding to the external recruiter, how long did it take? What was the first time they got back to you, the company, and kind of what was the interview process? I know you mentioned it, but were there any phone interviews, or were they all through Zoom or in person? And how long after was it when you knew you had the job?
So I believe that my first interaction with the recruiter from Jopwell was in the beginning of February or late January.
Got it.
She just reached out to me and was kind of just asking me and like saying that my experience in marketing, all those things would kind of like maybe make me a good fit for this position.
Mhm.
So I ended up just setting up a phone call with her, and it wasn't too formal. It was more just like my background, kind of what I was looking for in an internship, and just like her explaining what she would do.
Got
Um, Going through that process was a little bit more lengthy than some of like my peers who may have like gone through the direct website, because I also got help with like my resume. I kind of did interview prep with her.
Mhm.
And then through the other candidates from that external website, we had our own interviews, and we kind of also had our own like introduction to the company.
Mhm.
So that process was longer in that sense. And then with Western Digital directly, I had an initial phone recruiter with like the phone interview with the director of the program. And
Okay.
then after that, I had a Zoom interview and it was with 8 people. It was like
Oh,
back to back. Yeah, it was 8 AM on a Friday because that was the only time that worked for me. And I got to literally went through like 8 rounds of interviews back to back. It was like
that's
15
great.
minutes each. Yeah, it was really intense. Like I was really tired.
Uh,
Friday 8 AM. But in total, I think that was like an hour, maybe
gee.
like an hour interview. Yeah, it was a lot. But it was kind of good because I got to meet people off the bat who worked at the company, but it was definitely intense.
So when that ended, um, would you say from the time you were reached out to in February until they said, you know what, we want you for this position, was probably at least several months, right?
Actually, no, I knew that I had the position mid-March. So around spring
Oh,
break, like when my spring break is, I think the second week of March, that's when I knew that I had the position. So it was maybe like a month and a half from when I signed like from when I first interviewed to when I signed the contract.
sweet. And did this external recruiter reaching out, did this come at a time when you were sending out rounds of applications, or was it you weren't even applying yet and it was an opportunity?
I actually hadn't applied for anything. I was doing another internship at the time, so I wasn't really focused on like applying for summer internships yet. I was
Mhm.
probably gonna get into that like mid-February, but it
Yeah,
came a little bit early. I think at the most I just had on my LinkedIn like open to work, like when people put that little thing.
yeah.
And I had gotten reached out to by like a lot of recruiters, but I think that one, and then I also had, an interview with LinkedIn, like, those are the 2 that I was focused on.
Whoa.
Yeah, those are the 2 that I was focused on, like, the other ones, I kinda was just like, "This is a lot for me to handle right now."
Yeah.
It's a lot of interviews, but I think those 2, especially because they were the earliest on in the season, they were, like, late January, early February, like, I paid attention to those most.
Awesome. Yeah, wow. I always love to hear when an intern's the problem is actually that there's too many interviews. You don't hear that very often, so that's really cool. And now you mentioned it seems like you have a lot of experience. I looked through it all, and that's why people are reaching out. Could you kind of share what are some of the important experiences you had, job history, that you think is leading to all these, these requests, these opportunities? What did you come into Western Digital with?
So before Western Digital, I had 2 no, I had 3 internships or 2.
Wow.
I don't remember exactly, but I was currently working an internship with Uplift Campaigns, which is like a political consulting firm, and then the summer before that, I worked, in private equity. Actually, no, I had 2 because my freshman year was COVID, so I didn't have an internship
Right.
at all. So I had 2 internships before then. But I would say that I don't think that my internships before that were really what made me like stand out as an applicant or like drew people into me.
Mhm.
Most people when they messaged me on LinkedIn kind of called more attention to like my experience either as a student athlete or like my experience in leadership on campus rather than the experience that I had working internships. I do think that obviously played a role in it because they saw where my interest lied, but I
Yeah.
think more a lot of the recruiters who were reaching out to me weren't looking for like a specific major or someone who was working specifically like oh as a business major or as a marketing major. They kind of look for like more holistic applicants. So I think my experience like I was on the board for my BSU as a athlete liaison, and then I also was vice president of our Black Student Athlete Committee. So I think like
Wow.
that work was
Uh-huh.
more what drew people in rather than just like internship experience. Because I don't think that you can get experience and like you can
Right.
if you're willing to like work and like you have soft skills. I think that anyone will like work with you.
And so then, because my next question was actually going to be, which you pretty much answered, was what did what was the most valuable part of your experience in general, not just job history, that got them interested and eventually got you the role? And so you mentioned a few. I'm hoping you could speak more to those experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. If I'm being really transparent, I think that, because I was also interviewing with LinkedIn at the time, I do think that I made it to the final round, but I didn't get an offer. I do think that the reason that I didn't get an offer with LinkedIn was the fact that I didn't have as much, um, of those hard skills
Mhm.
because my interviews went really well, I felt really comfortable, but I just think that overall, like, maybe I wasn't as far along as they want me to be in comparison to other applicants, which I mean, it happens. Like, you can't really you can't
Yeah.
compare yourself across the board. But I think what got me that far in that application and then like what got me the offer from Western Digital was like those soft skills. Obviously, like I feel like I connected really well with a lot of the people who were interviewing me, and I also kind of showed like more of a holistic thought process rather than just like here's what I know, here's what I learned in school, here's what I
Right.
learned in my internship, rather than like here's all other things that I can bring to the table of value outside of like your traditional sales or marketing mindset.
So, would you say that your personality actually weighed heavily on their decision to hire you during the interview process?
I think that was part of it. I wouldn't say that's the entire thing. Obviously, I think that people want to know that you work well with people. They want to
Mhm.
know that like you'll fit into the company culture, whatever the case may be. But I think it was more the way that I was thinking about things and the way that I thought about problems rather than just like this is what I've learned in school. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No, I know what you mean.
Like
Yeah.
yeah.
You weren't just laying you they weren't asking you they were asking questions and you weren't just like listing off what credentials you have or exactly what you've done. You were, as far as I understand, you were being more, I don't know, transparent in your thought process, and they liked that. So,
Yeah, a lot of the interview questions were more on, what you do outside of the classroom. So I
oh,
think that they were just really looking for, like, holistic applicants,
uh-huh,
rather than just, like, someone who's studied marketing or someone who studied
right,
sales, so
because there's lots
yeah.
of those. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
cool. Okay, well, that's always reassuring to hear. You know that when I do these interviews, there's certain things that are commonalities between everybody, and one of them is actually, people recruiters and companies are interested obviously in experience, but during the interviews the things the that people think set them apart is the way there's kind of their soft skills, but like you mentioned, if they can express that they're kind of a well-rounded candidate, that's usually what gets them through.
Yeah.
So then, moving over to your actual position and what you did in your role, was this a full-time or a part-time position?
It was full-time, so it was 12 weeks, and I worked 9 to 5.
Wow.
Monday through
Okay.
Friday. Yeah, so definitely a new experience for me because I've only had like part-time internships,
Mhm.
but I think that it was a good experience because you never know what it's like to work full-time until you're doing
Yeah,
it.
no, it's a good taste of, the real world. And were you one of, like, many interns, or was this a specific role, only one intern? Essentially, were you in, like, a cohort or no?
Yeah, it was a cohort. I believe that there were 12 of us, either 10 or 12.
Around
Maybe
there,
I'm wrong. Yeah,
yeah.
I believe that was 10 to 12, but I know that was for our specific program. I do believe that they have other interns, like, in other, like, maybe data science or whatever the case may be, but for our specific, internship program, I believe that there were maybe 10 of us or 12 of us. I don't remember
This
exactly,
this was
so
the marketing division. Did it have, like, a specific name or
it
there
was the RAMP,
Oh, right.
RAMP Sales and Marketing
Got it.
program.
Would you say that your role was it more of a support role kind of internship or more project oriented, or was it a combination of both, would you say?
Um, I would definitely say that it was 70% of it was project focused and the rest of it was support focused. Well, I think it was also like support and learning
Mhm.
would be like a majority of it was trying to learn, but a lot of it was like projects actually doing things.
Yeah.
So, um, for example, for our internship specifically, we rotated through a 12-week program, and we worked with different teams. So we work with like digital marketing, we worked with like their OEM team, we worked with their retail sales, we worked with the channel sales and channel marketing team. So like we rotated through different teams,
Mhm.
and we did like different projects. So at the end of every 2 weeks before we rotated out of that specific team, we usually had a project to present at the end of that.
Yeah.
So we had like a big project for each team usually, and then we would maybe have like daily supporting task, or we would listen on like internal meetings, external meetings, but we definitely had a project for every single team that we rotated through.
That's awesome. And first of all, I love you did a couple of things that make my life easier, which is you broke down your support to project ratio in a percentage. I always ask people to clarify, like, if it was a percentage, what would you say? So 70/30, that makes total sense. And so, yeah, it seems heavily project oriented, at least one per rotation of team that you're working with. Could you
Mhm.
go more in depth as much as you remember? Because I know you recently finished it, but some things start slipping away once we're out of the internship. But I really want to go in depth on what you did. Since you mentioned there were several teams that you were moving through, if you could if you could give kind of an overview on as many as you remember, and then maybe for one of them after, we could really dive deep and see what you did on one of the teams.
Yeah, so my first team, I don't remember exactly the order, so don't quote me
Yeah,
on this, but I know that like the first team that I went through was digital marketing. So they work a lot with for example, Western Digital, they have a WDD Black team, which is more of like their gaming, hard drives, all of those things. So like we worked on their social channel. They have Twitch. We were working on kind of like they were trying to launch a new TikTok and do like expand their social media
uh,
programs as well, and kind of like what that outreach looks like, whether it be like with content creators or whatever like social campaigns they have. So maybe that would be like a commercial or like different, like the little posters or flyers that you see on LinkedIn, or you'll see them on Instagram,
yeah,
whatever the case may be.
yeah.
Yeah, so it was very like digital oriented. So that was the first team that we rotated through. That was super fun because they do a lot of like fun activities and all of those
It
types of
sounds fun,
things.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super fun. And we also did their channel sales and channel marketing. So a lot of that is like their e-commerce. So it's like, well, there was an e-commerce team as well, but the channel team and channel marketing team, there was also an e-commerce team. So they work more on like their websites
Mhm.
and what it looks like for them to be selling products online.
Okay.
There was like a retail team. So that would be like if you go into a Best Buy and you see like product display, what does that look like? How is it best? How do you get people to buy that?
Got
Like training people on the floor, like that type of thing, like in-store experiences.
it. Mhm.
So it was a good mix, and then we had OEM, so they work with, like, for internal teams, they have, like, different teams that they work with. I'm not even sure if I'm able to say who, but, like,
That's okay.
big yeah,
You
big tech companies. Yeah,
uh-huh.
I'm like, I'm not trying to get sued.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
No.
like, big tech companies that they would work with and support, who may need, like, data storage or who buy a lot from them,
Mhm.
and kind of like supporting them, what that looks like for those type of big relationships.
Wow. Okay. That was a lot. I don't know how you were able to go through while you were in the internship, all of those and like rework your thought because I feel like I'd get so connected to a certain team and then moving to the next one with just like you really have to work yourself out of that. But
Mhm.
okay, that was a fantastic overview. Is there maybe one or two of those teams that you remembered very vividly that you can kind of share with us what your specific function or contribution to the project or projects was? Essentially, I want to kind of know with as much detail as you think is relevant or that you can give specifically on how you were able to help. I'd love to know.
So I think obviously like digital marketing, because that was my first one, and it's like kind of fresh before you get into the mix of everything. And probably also e-commerce, like what I was doing on the e-commerce team as well.
Awesome.
Um, For digital marketing, it was it also depends because we were working and switching through teams at different points and like um obviously like there's different heights of when
Mhm.
people are trying to sell, like end of the month, beginning of the month, so it kind of like gets a little hectic. So for digital marketing, they wanted us to kind of just introduce like our creativity and kind of basically the question they want to ask, like, if there's anything that you could change or like any project that you could do, campaign that you could do, what would you do? What would it look like? All of that stuff. So there was like a lot of creative freedom with that. That was like our big project. But on
Mhm.
a day to day, we kind of just looked at different social projects that they had going on, how to support with that, like any ideas that we would have there.
Mhm.
We also kind of worked on messaging a little bit, like social messaging, communication, obviously like within the realms of what was already approved, but we kind of worked with that and saw how that looks on a like on a social side and like on a digital side. So that was a
Okay.
lot of what we did there.
Oh,
It's only 2 weeks.
oh, got it, got it. Yeah, that's pretty short actually to so for your larger or you mentioned for the project when they asked a question, did you have to I'm assuming maybe every did all the interns have to individually answer it with like a presentation or was it a group presentation or just kind of sharing at like a meeting, like a well-developed thought or plan? How did
Okay,
that
I probably should have clarified. So each week we rotate with one other intern.
go? Mm,
So we have a partner, like a different partner every week.
that's
So we
cool.
were kind of like working with them. So we, I know for the project that we did, I believe that we had one project that we presented. I don't remember exactly. I had one project that I presented with this partner, and then again, we had our own individual projects. So for that bigger one, they were just like, "What would you change?" Whatever the case may be, and we kind of just presented it to that internal team. Anyone else who like kind of wanted to listen. Sometimes we would have like if they had time, like people who were higher up, they would kind of listen and see what we're doing. And then also like our mentors who were kind of like supporting us through the position, they were also kind of listening in and kind of just seeing what we did in those 2 weeks.
That's awesome. And then in the support side, would you say it was kind of more like feedback on certain things? They were, because I know you mentioned there was also like a little bit of support during those 2 weeks where they would,
Yes. We had a lot of support. So we had a mentor. So the Western Digital, they have a new college grad program. So we would have a mentor every week. Usually they would be a part of the new college grad program or they would be like freshly graduated, maybe like 2, 3 years, 4 years out. So we
Mhm.
would have like a mentor every week that we would like set up a meeting with, kind of get to know. They would kind of support us with anything that we would have going on that week. And then we had our two kind of people who were basically I guess our direct managers who
Mhm.
were managing the intern program as a whole, who would set up individual meetings with us. So we'd have like a 30-minute check-in and they would give us feedback from the teams that we rotated with. Like
That's
if there was
awesome.
anything big that was going on, which usually that wasn't the case, but they would have like little meetings. Oh, how is it going? Like, do you like this team? What do you like about it? Kind of like going
Yeah,
through it like that or just seeing if we needed any help with anything.
that must have been, yeah, that must have been cool having that. Because I know some people have mentioned that they've been dropped into an internship and they feel like there's no structure and they're like really freaked out all the time if they're doing things correctly. So that must have been nice.
Yeah, it was very structured.
You also mentioned, I think, the e-commerce team. Maybe it's more in your mind, or if there was another team that you remember directly. I want to pick your brain on just one more of those teams, um, if you can remember. Kind of what was your contribution, or maybe what was the project for one of those teams?
Yeah, so I kind of like remember the e-commerce, but I think I remember more like maybe the channel
Uh-huh.
marketing and channel sales. They were one and the same basically, but well, they weren't exactly the same. Like there's obviously different roles, but that was one rotation that we went through together. And for our position that we were looking at, we did like a lot of spiff flyers. So we
What's
would
that?
kind of like so we put products, like updated products on the flyers with like it doesn't sound really interesting when you say it, but like with like
No,
the
it does.
different gigabytes and like the prices and all the other stuff. Yeah, it wasn't like crazy. It was not like it was like creative or anything like that, but we would kind of just put them into flyers so it was like easily digestible when people
Awesome.
would, I guess, when they would send them out to clients. So we were doing that. Um, we also we sat on a lot of like internal meetings as well because one of the things that they were doing is like trying to sell products to clients and like trying to get them to buy more, whatever the case may be, and like support them as well. So we sat in on like a lot of internal meetings for that position. I
Did
think more so than any of the other rotations.
did you enjoy that aspect of like seeing the reality of like the business behind it? Because you said they were in some of them they were pitching to clients or at least discussing it. Like, did you enjoy sitting in on those meetings?
Um, I think not really, to be honest. I think that it gets a little bit confusing
Mhm.
unless it's like a one-on-one meeting, but like you're really just a fly on the wall. And a lot of
Right.
times like you don't know what they're saying. Corporations like love to use a lot of acronyms.
Oh, all jargon.
And I don't
Yeah.
even know if everyone even understands what's going on, but like it's kind of like a yeah, 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 yeah. I definitely didn't know what was going on a lot of times when they were talking, so I was kind of just like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh,
Okay.
I don't know what's happening, but I'm here,"
Right.
whatever the case may be. But it was more I think it was more beneficial towards the end of my internship. I When I was with the retail team,
Mhm.
um, they were more one-on-one client meetings, and the clients themselves were also, like, very, very, happy for us to be there, so they kind of, like, involved us. So I feel like I learned and retained a lot more information than, like, sitting on a big, big client call with, like, a bunch of people where they're just, like, throwing
Right.
out jargon, like, you don't know what's really going on.
What rotation were you in for those kind of more one-on-one meetings with the clients present?
That was the retail sales team, so the teams are, like they work on more the display of like products in person and like how other companies want to like display the products together. So if like they have for example, like if they have a product with another company, like they look at, okay, how are we going to get people to buy more, whatever the case may be, what is this going to look like for us? And
Mhm.
that was a lot more one-on-ones with the clients where like we asked them questions as well and like they kept us involved. It was really cool.
Yeah, no, it sounds cool. That whole experience, I love the rotation aspect where you got a taste of like all these different sections. Well, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it. That's probably my favorite section of these interviews is really understanding kind of a taste of what you've done. So I appreciate that. Um, just a few more questions left. What would you say is the most valuable thing that you learned while at this internship?
Okay, I think this might not be like what people like want to hear, but I mean, I guess like I learned two things that are very valuable. The one thing that I guess that I learned is like there's a lot of options that you have, and I feel like when you're in college, you think that there's only like a couple paths that you could take,
Mhm.
but you can literally do anything. Like it doesn't matter what your major is. Like if you want to do something, you can literally do it. Like that's one thing that I'll say. And there's also a lot of options. You might think that you want to do marketing, but like what does marketing actually mean? Like what does that like you can work in whatever type of sphere. You can work in fashion, you can work in tech, you can work, I don't know, at a restaurant. Like you can do anything with
Mhm.
like one path and like there's a lot of different things. And like don't be afraid to jump from different things as well. I think that's one thing that I would learn. And then I also one of the biggest things that I learned is like definitely stay true to yourself. Like when you're going through internships, don't feel the need to just accept a position or like be afraid to accept a position right out of college because I'm a senior, I'm about to graduate soon,
Mhm.
and I've done a lot of internships. I'm in another internship right now, and I feel like a lot of people they're just like, let me choose this position because of job security. I'm just gonna do this, whatever the case may be. And like I do think that you can get anything out of an internship. It's what you make it, but don't feel the need to just like take a position or take a role because you're afraid of what's going to come after college because you know what you want and you know if it feels right for you. And I think it's also important to like stay true to that, especially coming out of college because you have so much like flexibility and you have so many options.
That's awesome. Yeah, I actually totally agree, but, the second one is that's a piece of advice I actually haven't heard before, but I think it's totally true. We don't realize how many types of jobs there are within a field. We just think that because there's a set amount of degrees available at university, that those are all the jobs. It's either business, engineering, whatever. And this kind of leads into the last question. You already partly answered it, but this is a little more specific. Do you have any advice for people who are applying to similar internships as the one that you had at Western Digital?
Yeah, I know that, like, the thing is, a lot of people are like, "I didn't hear back," or, like, whatever the case may be, and especially with, like, a big position, because a company like Western Digital, they're a very big tech company,
Mhm,
um, and if you are looking to get into a very big tech company, I think that it's important to have connections,
mhm,
because I don't think that I would have gotten any interviews, or like would have really had my resume paid attention to the way that it was if I didn't have like a recruiter reach out to me, or I didn't have like that networking. And I know that it's really hard because a lot of people say like it's who you know, but there's a lot of people who get positions because like their family works at a job. Like not everyone has that type of accessibility and upward mobility as like maybe some of your peers. But
mhm.
I really do feel like a lot of people love to talk about themselves. They love to talk about their job. And if you see someone on LinkedIn that you want to do what they do, it never hurts to like send them a message, set up an informational interview, because you can either figure out like this is something that I want to do, and you can make a good connection and like maybe get a referral or get pointed in the right direction, or you can figure out I don't really like what this person does. They sound miserable. So I think that it's important to like make those connections, because just applying blindly to a position, your application might not be seen. They get so many applications. And I do
Mhm.
think a lot of people who get positions, they know someone. Like,
Yeah,
sadly, that is what happens. They just know someone who works there, and it's unfortunate, but, like, if you really wanna put yourself in the best position to get seen, like, you do have to kinda do that extra grunt work to get to know people.
yeah. Networking definitely takes. I mean, that word almost has become like a jargon word. It's like you need to network, but if people realize it's like no, it's difficult, and you really have to work for it. And like you said, reach out for informational interviews because you're battling against all these people whose parents have been in the company, and the person
Yeah.
who gets the job is probably they might not even be qualified, but they're still going to get it. So you're fighting uphill. But that's reassuring that you mentioned that. And you know, I'm going to wrap this up. Um, and I just want to thank you. We're going to include your LinkedIn somewhere in the email newsletter. And so that if people want to connect with you, they can. I hope that's all right. And if there is anything else you want to include, like your Instagram or any other socials, we'll include that as well. But otherwise, it'll at least be your LinkedIn. So I want to say thank you so much for taking the time and doing this interview. I had a great time listening to your experience. So thank you.
Yeah, of course, and anyone can connect with me on LinkedIn. I have, like I always am open to answering questions, or I don't think that I know everything, but I'm a senior, so I feel like I've been through a lot. I'm
There you
ready to
go.
get out of college.
You heard it from her first. Reach out.